In any case that involves a parent hurting their child, we as true crime consumers are always asking the same question. Why? Why would a parent hurt their child? What could possibly drive such an evil, unthinkable act? Well, in today's case, we're given an explanation, but this time it's up to us to determine whether we believe her or not. Chloe Driver claims that she was brainwashed by a religious cult, then snapped and murdered her baby in a moment of insanity. So, as you go through this case and hear the details, I want you to keep that defense in mind, and at the end of the video, I want you all to weigh in down in the comments and let me know if you believe her. But before we get into this horrific, heartbreaking case, I want to take a moment to talk about one thing that does bring me joy this holiday season, and that is affordable, cute jewelry. Ana Luisa is a jewelry brand built to deliver simple, beautiful, high-quality jewelry at a fair price. Starting at only $39, they really have something for everyone with their long-lasting, water-resistant jewelry essentials that not only make you look good, but you can feel good about wearing them. Ana Luisa jewelry is made to stand the test of time with strength and humidity testing, with pieces that won't break your budget. I've been loving these little dainty hoops that I've been wearing every day. The hoops I have in my first piercing have a little star on one side and then a moon on the other, and I just think they're so cute. Then on the second piercing, I have a little stud with 3 little gems in a row. I love the shape of these and how they pair with my everyday hoops. I love having pieces that I can wear every day to subtly uplift my whole look. Ana Luisa has so many different pieces that can really show your personality. Ana Luisa offers free and fast US shipping and exchanges, as well as affordable worldwide shipping. So, if you're looking to grab some luxury jewelry at unbeatable prices, Ana Luisa's Black Friday sale is where you want to be. Now is the best time to treat yourself or shop for gifts at discounted Black Friday prices. It's genuinely the perfect gift for a friend or significant other, especially with the beautiful packaging it comes in. It's ready to be given. Ana Luisa is offering a huge sale of up to 35% off right now when you head to their website using my link down below. Once again, click the link in my description box below and head to Ana Luisa for up to 35% off their already amazing prices. Thank you again so much to Ana Luisa for partnering with me on today's video. With that being said, let's get into this wild ride of a case. Hannah Nicole Driver was born to Chloe Driver and her husband, Brian Joyce. Now, Chloe and Brian were involved in a more alternative lifestyle. Chloe met Brian when she was just 17 and he was 38. The two got married, but Brian was a polygamist who had all sorts of interesting beliefs and practices, which we will get into more as we go throughout the video. Now, all members within this group had different religious names that they went by, with Brian going by Benjamin Michael, Benjamin, or Z, and Chloe going by Kuwani. In court proceedings, you'll hear him be called by different names, but for the sake of the video, I'll be calling him Brian because that seems to be what he most commonly went by. Either way, about a year after Chloe and Brian got married, another wife was added to the mix, Jessica. A year after that, Brian married a third woman, Sarah. Around that same time, Chloe gave birth to her adorable baby daughter, Hannah. So, by late 2019, going into early 2020, Sarah, Jessica, Brian, Chloe, and Hannah were all living together in a home as a family. Then, by around April of 2020, Brian met Jason Spillers through a mutual friend who sort of explained to Jason the lifestyle that Brian was living. Jason said that he always believed that men should be able to be with multiple women, and after meeting Brian, he became very interested in his way of life. He was interested in the social dynamics within the relationship, saying that he's really only seen polygamy practiced in religious contexts. So when he learned that Brian had 3 wives, he was intrigued. He wanted to see how it worked. He wanted to see what the women had to say, how they felt, and how they all interacted with one another. By the time Jason got involved in the group, Chloe and Brian had been married the longest for almost 3 years, I believe. Jessica had been in the picture for about 2 years, while Sarah had been married to Brian for 6-ish months. Chloe did already have Hannah at the time as well that Jason joined the group. In terms of their lifestyle, how Brian treated his wives and how Chloe interacted with the other women and her baby, a lot of that information comes from Jason. I want to note that while I do believe a lot of what Jason has to say about the crime itself, we do have to recognize that he is biased, and you will find out how as I explain what he had to say. And if you watch the court proceedings with Jason in them, he's not the most likable character. He has a lot of beliefs that maybe a lot of people would disagree with, including myself. So I do take what he says about how Brian treated the other women with a grain of salt. Now, the group lived a very nomadic lifestyle. They often traveled together in a van, going all around to different states on the East Coast, only staying in one place for a month or two at a time before packing up and moving on to the next place. Originally, the family had been staying in North Carolina for a while in a home with a friend, but by late May of 2020, they all went down to Florida, where they all stayed in motels for a few months. During that time, Jason Spillers made his way down south as well and met Brian and his wives in Florida. For the months that followed, he said that he spent most of his time with them, though he had his own van where he would sleep each night. During that time, Jason got pretty close with Brian and his wives. Overall, Jason described the relationship between Brian, Chloe, Sarah, and Jessica as a very beautiful and healthy relationship. Brian treated his wives very well, with kindness, compassion, and love. He said that Brian treated them as a man should treat his wife. The women all interacted well together as well. There weren't any arguments, no jealousy between the women. Everyone loved Hannah, including Chloe, who is described as a kind, nurturing, warm, gentle mother. Along with practicing polygamy, as I said, the group had other interesting beliefs. They all believed that they had a higher consciousness than the rest of the world. They believed that they were called to see beyond societal practices and traditional worldviews. Jason highlighted that none of the practices Brian partook in were forced on him or any of the women, but they all willingly participated because they believed that the practices were healing. Jason said that he was very much influenced in a positive way by being around this family. Brian and the women were all vegans, and after meeting the group, Jason took on a vegan diet as well, saying that it just felt like the logical thing to him. The group believed in non-traditional medicine, so they never took Hannah to the doctor, and she didn't have a birth certificate. Some of their alternative healing methods included sensory deprivation or dark therapy, where they would black out the windows and meditate for extended periods of time. Additionally, the group drank their own urine to reap the health benefits it provided. Jason said that he'd actually been drinking his urine daily for years prior to meeting Brian because he was already aware of the healing benefits it provided. He went on to say that this was a tradition in the past when people knew their own bodies. We become so deranged and deluded that people in society live in a state of mental illness and addiction to alcohol and toxic food that we've become separate from what it means to be healthy. He calls the drinking of urine therapy. In addition to these alternative lifestyle choices, the group believed in very traditional gender roles. He said that Brian was the head of the household. He took care of his women and provided them with love, shelter, and food. Jason said that these roles are not biblical in nature. He said that men are simply better leaders, better decision makers, and can regulate their own emotions in ways women simply can't. He said that Brian's wives could have left if they wanted to. They weren't in any sort of cult. They weren't forced to stay. They were being provided for, loved, and cared for. However, according to Jason, shortly after getting involved with the group and learning more about each individual, he did notice that Chloe suffered from some mental health issues. He said that as time went on, Chloe's behavior started to become increasingly out of control. Jason said that Chloe would go into these episodes where she would become delusional, start shaking, and then become violent. He describes that she would get this look on her face where her eyes looked completely absent. Then she would start screaming and jump into these frenzied attacks, either against herself, where she would punch herself in the face or scratch herself, or she would attack Brian and the other wives. Then, once she was out of that state, she would say that she didn't remember what just happened, but when she was told, she would start crying and profusely apologizing. But according to Jason, she never attacked Hannah. Then in November of 2020, there was another time where they were driving and Chloe suddenly started having a freak out. They pulled over and Chloe was begging to call her mom, so they gave her the phone and told her to call her, but she wouldn't make the call. Instead, she just continued freaking out, acting hysterical, and trying to run into traffic, causing the men to have to restrain her. As that was happening, a random Samaritan saw what was going on, pulled over, and got herself involved. As Jason described it, the woman was yelling at Brian and him to let Chloe go, and then ran over to Brian's car and took the keys out, telling him that he's not going anywhere and threatening to call the police, saying that they're gonna take his baby away. As all of that was happening, eventually Brian, Chloe, and the other wife that was with them at the time, they were able to leave the scene, while Jason and the other friend stayed behind. According to Jason, the woman started beating up on the friend who was a female friend, so he jumped in and broke up the fight. Eventually, this landed Jason some charges, although he said this was just a big misunderstanding and the only reason he would ever attack another woman is to stop her from attacking his friend. But this whole situation seems to be what really set Chloe off. After this, she started saying that she needed to protect Hannah at all costs. She was so paranoid all the time that the group started looking for different ways to try and keep her calm. Each person had their own strategy for calming her down, with Jason saying that sometimes Brian would hold her hands or hug her to get her to stop harming herself. Jason would use his words to try and talk her down and be patient with her until she came out of that state. Another strategy they used to try and keep Chloe calm was by giving her CBD. Jason said that he had given her some of his that he bought off of an individual, and she had also ordered herself some online. However, it didn't seem like this really did much to help because as the weeks went on, these outbursts and delusions continued. Then by December 8th, 2020, everything came to a head in the most traumatic, horrifying way possible. By that time, the group were traveling from North Carolina back to Florida to move there once again. So during those months, as I stated, they were already in North Carolina, they went to Florida, and then they went back. They went back to like Tennessee, they went to Connecticut, all sorts of different states, and then they landed back in North Carolina, and then we're going back to Florida. So they were moving all over the East Coast during this time. But either way, again, at that time, they were going from North Carolina back to Florida to move there once again. As they were driving, they stopped at a friend's house in Canton, Georgia, because Brian had some items in that friend's basement at his home. The plan was to stop at the house, Jason and Brian would load these items into their moving trucks, and then they would continue their journey onto Florida. But that's not how it actually went. That day, 911 received a call from Jessica, one of Brian's wives, who was frantic and hysterical. She told the dispatcher that she thinks a baby just died, and she thinks a woman is responsible for it. The line goes quiet for a few minutes before Jessica continues, "I don't believe she's breathing. I believe she was slit across the throat." Now, according to Jason, once they stopped at the home, all the women went upstairs to take naps. Jessica and Sarah went into one room while Chloe and Hannah went into a different bedroom. Meanwhile, the friend who owned the home stayed on his computer to work from home while Jason and Brian moved the items from the basement into the moving truck. By the time they were finished, Sarah and Jessica made their way downstairs, meeting Jason and Brian at the truck to head out. By that point, though, Chloe and Hannah hadn't joined the group yet, so Brian went up to grab them and let Chloe know it was time to leave. However, once he got to their room, he noticed that the door was locked. He tried knocking, tried getting in, but nobody was answering. Inside the room, though, he did hear some strange noises that sent him into a panic, so he kicked that door down. And when he did, he was met with a horrifying sight. He saw his 13-month-old daughter, Hannah, lying on the bed, covered in blood with obvious stab wounds to her neck. Nearby, he saw Chloe lying on the floor, holding a knife, also covered in blood, with a stab wound to her neck as well. According to Jason, in that moment, they were all just standing in the driveway waiting to leave when he, Sarah, and Jessica all heard the most intense, blood-curdling scream imaginable, followed by Brian yelling, "What did you do?" It truly shocked each and every one of them. The screams prompted Jason to run inside the home and head up to the room where he saw blood everywhere. He then saw Brian on the floor trying to give mouth-to-mouth to Hannah. Jason describes hearing Hannah making gurgling sounds. He then ran into the room and tried putting pressure on Chloe's wounds using his sweatshirt and hands. But as he was doing that, Chloe said, "Stop, I'm supposed to die." As he did that, Brian was also putting pressure on Hannah's wounds. Once first responders arrived, they described that both Jason and Brian were in a state of shock, desperately trying to save Hannah and Chloe's lives. Jason would go on to describe the whole scene as a massacre. Immediately, first responders loaded Hannah and Chloe into ambulances, rushing them to the Northside Cherokee Hospital as fast as possible. By the time they got there, Chloe was in critical condition, but she was alive and immediately taken in for surgery. Meanwhile, medical staff surrounded Hannah, desperately performing CPR in an attempt to bring her back. But no matter the efforts they put forth, it wasn't enough to bring Hannah back. She was pronounced dead by 3:10 p.m. on December 8th, 2020.
And I told her to call the cops.
Okay.
To call 911 because something was definitely wrong. Like, I had no idea what had happened, but it was a scream of pain and like something like bad. And then I ran upstairs because that's where the scream was coming from. And then I walked into this like really horrible thing.
Okay. What happened when you walked into the room?
I walked into the room and there was blood everywhere. And Z was, I'm going to talk through this one. Z was trying to give Nimsy like mouth to mouth. Like, she had obviously had some laceration wounds to her neck, and there was like blood everywhere. And Kawani was laying on the ground, and she had tried to kill herself by stabbing herself in the chest and in the throat, and she was bleeding profusely. And so I was just went into shock, basically. Like, I have very little or no experience, especially with a child. Like, I mean, I've witnessed a couple things, but not like this. And so Z's like giving his daughter mouth to mouth, trying to like breathe some life back into her, and she's like gurgling her last breath, and Kawani's laying on the floor bleeding profusely.
Was Nimsy still alive when you went into the room?
She was on her way out.
Okay.
Like, she was gurgling, but she wasn't moving, and she looked very not alive. I went to the ground, and Z said, "Keep pressure on the wounds." And so I did. I went down and I kept pressure on the wounds, and I tried to just stop them from bleeding. I was using my sweatshirt and my hands to put pressure on the wound that was on her chest and on her neck until the paramedics got there. She was saying that she wanted to see Nimsy one more time, and she was actually trying to push me away. And I was holding pressure on the wound, and she had blood all over her hands, and she was pushing my face away, telling me, "Stop, I'm supposed to die." And I wanted to see, and then she was like trying to lean up to see Nimsy one more time, but I held her down because I thought that, I just didn't want her to lose any more blood, because there was blood everywhere and all over me and all over our clothes and all over the floor and the bed. It was like a massacre. And I just wanted to try to save her life. So I held her down and kept pressure on the wounds for probably about 2 minutes because the paramedics came really fast.
Upon examination, it was found that Hannah suffered a total of 4 stab wounds. One was an 1.5 inch deep stab wound to her back. The remaining 3 stab wounds were to her throat, one of which was so deep that it went clear through to the back of her neck, transecting her vertebrae. She had suffered a horrifying frenzied attack. Meanwhile, once Chloe arrived to the hospital, she was treated for the stab wound to her neck and stabilized with a tracheostomy. Once she was awake and alert, detectives visited her in the hospital room to speak with her. During that time, due to the trach placement, she was unable to speak, so she wrote down her answers to these officers. Immediately, once officers started their interview with her, she wrote down 2 things. One was, I want to know if my baby survived ASAP, and I want to know who is staying with her. That is when the officer informed her that Hannah was dead. She was then asked if her husband caused her injuries, to which she wrote, he didn't do it, I did it. Going on to write, quote, I was going insane and no longer wanted to be with his friends, but kept coming back for him. I only wanted my baby and husband, but he refused.
She said, I want to know if my baby survived ASAP. That's one question. I want to know who is staying with her. That's the second question. Okay. And I'm going to answer both for you. Your baby did not survive. Okay? Your baby did not make it. All right? Your baby is currently getting an autopsy done to find out what actually happened to her body. Okay? Do you want me to read it? Yeah. You want me to read it? He didn't do it. I did. I was going insane and no longer wanted to be with his friends, but kept coming back for him. I only wanted my baby and husband, but he refused.
That is pretty much what they got from that interview before leaving for the day. The following day, officers returned back and spoke with Chloe once again. This time, the first question she wrote down was, how long will my prison sentence be for killing her? At this point, Chloe had been requesting to speak with her husband, but he wasn't allowed to physically visit due to COVID-19 restrictions. So they did a phone call where he spoke with her, she wrote down her answers, and a detective read them for him over the phone. The phone call started with Brian asking why she did what she did, and Chloe wrote, it felt safest. Then I felt horrible. I went because I had no choice. Brian responded saying that she did have a choice, then asked why she felt like she didn't have a choice. Chloe wrote that Brian took her money and wouldn't allow her to buy land and just be with Hannah as long as she needed. She wrote, you had a whole group to take care of and blamed me for all the problems. Brian responded that Chloe had been blaming herself for everything. He wasn't blaming her for anything. Chloe responded with, yes, you constantly told me. Going on to write, except everybody treated me like it was. I only existed if I moved first. The girls always hated. That's why you bring us indifferently to places, separating us. She went on to say that she tried telling him anytime she wasn't mentally well, anytime she would freak out, but he wouldn't listen. She said that he told her about black magic that he was going to do to Hannah if she didn't listen to him. She continued, because I could not handle being with the group anymore, and you left me no alternatives with certain threats. He said that he didn't know what threats she was talking about. After this, they spoke a bit more about what happened and why, and eventually Brian said that he didn't want to talk to her anymore, so they hung up with him.
When did you go down and get a knife? Why?
It felt safest, then I felt horrible. I went because I had no choice.
You've always had a choice. I don't know why you felt like you had no choice. Why did you feel like you had no choice?
She says I couldn't handle being with the group anymore. And you left no alternative with the certain threat. What threat did you make to her?
Not sure. She's your friend.
Come on, then. Let's be truthful here. She's being truthful here.
Ask her what threats.
Taking the money and not letting me just buy land and with her as long as she needed you had a whole group to take care of. Blamed me for all the problems. You blamed Listen. She gave you what she had, okay? So.
After hanging up with Brian, the detective started asking Chloe about a video her mother emailed her, the detective. This video was dated November 27th, 2020, and in the video, Chloe states, quote, "My name is Chloe Driver. It's 11/27/2020. I'm being forced to get in a truck with Benjamin Ben Michael or Brian Joyce to see my daughter because he kept her away from me. I don't know where she is. He won't tell me anything. He kept her with people." It seems like Chloe had sent her mother this video at some point, maybe that same day, and obviously Chloe's mother found this video immediately concerning after finding out what happened, and she wanted the detective to see it right away, so that is why she emailed it to her. This was proof that Brian was controlling and may have been psychologically abusing Chloe before the murder ever took place. By this point, of course, detectives had been going in on their investigation into what led Chloe to murdering her own baby before attempting to take her own life. They started by searching the room where the stabbing went down, and there they found the knife that was used, which was a kitchen knife that belonged to a set within that home. As a reminder, they were in a friend's home, so it was a knife that belonged to that friend. They also found Chloe's CBD oils as well as her cell phone, which they took in for examination. On Chloe's phone, they found several Google searches, all which took place between the dates of November 25th through December 2nd, 2020. Some of these searches were regarding the use of CBD and breastfeeding, as well as CBD oils used for mental illness. She searched for things like, what does the Bible say about having more than one wife? Can God forgive me for being with a married man? Can God forgive me for harming my husband? And 12 Tribes single woman with baby. For reference, 12 Tribes is a religious movement in Chattanooga, Tennessee. The group combines Christianity with its own beliefs and practices, emphasizing communal living and self-sustainability. To note, her parents lived in Tennessee at the time, and she had visited her parents in the weeks before Hannah's death. So, this may have been why she was researching a communal living area in that state. Other concerning Google searches from Chloe's phone included killing someone to save them, killing because the world is fake. She also searched for how to snap a neck multiple times, which took her to a website that explained how much force is required to kill someone by twisting their neck, comparing it to the movies, saying the movies make it look a lot easier than it is in real life. Of course, these searches are very telling and give some insight into Chloe's mental state in the weeks and days leading to Hannah's murder. It shows that not only was Chloe questioning her lifestyle and the choices she made, but she was starting to formulate a plan about what she was going to do about it. At this point, it was clear that Chloe Driver is, in fact, responsible for the brutal, violent murder of her 13-month-old daughter, Hannah. At this time, she was charged with felony murder, malice murder, as well as first-degree cruelty to children. To this, she pleaded not guilty due to reason of insanity. Her trial took quite some time to begin, probably due to all of the mental health examinations and evidence they had to gather. But finally, by November of 2024, the trial for Hannah's murder started. The trial wasn't an argument of whether or not Hannah was responsible for the killing. She admitted it. It was already known that she killed her baby girl. What they were arguing was whether or not Chloe knew right from wrong when she killed her baby. Was her mental health so bad that she didn't know what she was doing, therefore couldn't be held accountable for her actions? The prosecution was arguing that Chloe may have been influenced by the extreme beliefs promoted by this polygamist group she was involved with. But that was no excuse for the horrific crime she committed. They argued that she was tired of the life she had with Brian and wanted a normal life for Hannah. She didn't want to have to share Brian, the father of her child. She wanted him all to herself. But when she realized she couldn't have that, she planned the murder of her own daughter. As we see in those Google searches, she was pondering different ways to do it, such as snapping her neck. Then, on the day of the murder, she went upstairs into her own room while the other women went into a different room. Chloe waited in that room until Jason and Brian were distracted and took that as an opportunity to sneak into the kitchen to grab the kitchen knife. Then she quietly carried out the murder of her daughter before stabbing herself in the neck. Once she was taken to the hospital and able to communicate, one of the first things she asked was how long her prison sentence would be. That proves that she knew that what she did was wrong. Yes, she may have been involved in a strict lifestyle, a very unconventional lifestyle. She may have wanted out and wanted a normal life for Hannah. But regardless of her reasoning, she knew that killing her daughter was wrong. She wasn't in a state of blackout. She didn't think that killing her daughter was the right thing to do. She knew what she was doing, and she knew it was wrong. Therefore, she needs to be held accountable for her actions and should be found guilty of the murder. As I said, the defense was arguing that Chloe was not mentally well at the time of the murder. Her mental health had gotten increasingly worse, as we can see via the testimony we heard from Jason earlier. Those around her could all see that she was struggling. Even her mother testified, saying that Chloe hadn't been herself in a long time. Her behaviors were growing more and more out of control until she finally snapped. One of the doctors who examined her, Dr. McLendon Garrett, diagnosed Chloe with schizoaffective disorder, borderline personality disorder, and cannabis use disorder. He explained that Chloe had a very unstable childhood. Her family was cold towards her, leading her to running away from the home on multiple occasions. She would end up living with different boys she met, even moving out of state with one of them. In her early life, she struggled with suicidal ideation and self-harm, including cutting and even once attempting to overdose on pills. When she was a teenager, she was prescribed depression medication, but she didn't take them consistently. It was also around this time when she started experimenting with illegal drugs, which of course contributed even further to her declining mental health. From the time she was a child, she experienced paranoia, delusions, and manic episodes. When she was 17 years old, she met her soon-to-be husband, a 38-year-old adult. Chloe described Brian as charming, intelligent, and engaging. Of course, with her history of mental health issues, this large age gap created some vulnerabilities in their relationship, which, according to Dr. Garrett, Brian preyed on. Dr. Garrett went on to say that Chloe was incredibly isolated throughout her relationship with Brian. She felt that he was collecting people once he started adding the other wives, and she felt ganged up on and minimized. But he used control and manipulation tactics that made her feel like she couldn't leave the relationship. Throughout the relationship, she said that she wasn't allowed to speak with others unless it was to recruit more women into their lifestyle. She didn't have her own money and wasn't allowed to go into a store or be on the phone without permission. She didn't have a car or a driver's license. She was only allowed to work when they absolutely needed the money, but anytime she got a job, it would be very short-lived. She went along with the relationship, believing that it was a good thing for her for a while. But then she started questioning things, especially after having Hannah. She was worried about her not getting the proper prenatal care. She didn't like that Hannah didn't have a birth certificate and was worried about her not getting the proper vaccinations. She wanted to have a normal life with her baby and Brian, but she quickly realized that this was not going to be possible. Then, according to Chloe, the control Brian enacted over the group just got worse and worse as time went on. These dark therapy sessions weren't times of peace and meditation, but punishment. She said that she would be confined to a bed, denied access to a bathroom, and forced to urinate on herself during these sessions. She said that she was forced to do this. It was not a choice. Then, her delusions and paranoia also became increasingly worse after having Hannah. According to Dr. Garrett, on Hannah's first birthday, Chloe went into a catatonic state. She started to become consumed with her own thoughts. She felt like she was just a character in a movie and that she couldn't really die. She thought that photographs could download her back into moments in the past. She said that she felt like they were living in hell and that they were all just actors in a movie they can rewind. When they die, they don't really die because they can rewind the movie. Then, as she felt more and more ostracized and isolated from the group, her behaviors also grew increasingly erratic. She tried to leave the group multiple times. Now, remember earlier when Jason described Chloe jumping out of the car and saying that she wanted to call her mom. Chloe described that this was an attempt to leave the group. She flagged down a passerby. It wasn't just some good Samaritan trying to jump in and involve herself in the situation. She said that she flagged her down trying to get help with leaving, but she was coerced into staying. She said that they did allow her to call her mom, but it was through a phone that was monitored by Brian. She said that anytime she tried leaving, Brian would make threats that she would never see her daughter again and would withhold her. As I stated earlier, as Chloe's behaviors grew more and more out of control, the group tried different ways to calm her down, including giving her CBD. But according to Chloe, the CBD just made her more and more paranoid. In the weeks before the murder, Chloe said that she was seeing signs that told her that Brian and the wives wanted her to kill herself and Hannah. She started seeing knives everywhere and believing that she could read minds, which were telling her to kill herself and her daughter. She thought that everyone was ganging up on her or were out to get her. Then she started to feel like her having Hannah with Brian, who was married to other women, was sinful. She felt that she was downloading all of her sin, all the bad parts of herself, into Hannah through breastfeeding. She felt that she was literally pouring sin into her child. Brian would later report that Chloe stopped referring to Hannah by her name and started only referring to her as Sin. In her examination, Dr. Garrett asked her if there was one specific trigger that set her off and caused her to kill Hannah. Chloe explained that there was one time where she asked Brian to throw her some clean clothes so that she could change Hannah, but Brian threw a dirty shirt at her, which made her incredibly upset. In that moment, Chloe said she felt unworthy of life. She said in that moment she snapped. She felt like the only way for them to get out of their relationship was for her to kill herself and Hannah. When it comes to why she chose to stab herself and her daughter, she explained that in the video game she plays, it only takes one stab to the neck to kill someone quickly. So she thought she could kill Hannah with one stab to the neck and then stab herself, and they would both die quickly and painlessly. But of course, that's not how it actually went down, and she probably just lost it and started stabbing Hannah repeatedly, knowing that she wasn't dying, and stabbed her until she felt that she was dead, probably. As I said, Chloe's mother also took the stand to testify at trial. She said that she had never liked Brian and didn't want Chloe with him. Then, after Chloe had Hannah, she had very little communication with her, besides the rare occasion that Chloe would visit. Anytime Chloe would visit the home, she urged her to just come back and stay there with Hannah and leave Brian, but she never would. By July of 2020, she noticed a visible difference in her daughter. She started losing weight and was mumbling a lot. She would go into sort of a zombie-like state and wasn't totally herself. She didn't really do much or say much about it because when Chloe was around, she was just happy to see her and Hannah. In retrospect, she said that she wishes she did more to help Chloe, but she really didn't like Brian, and any time she did offer to help Chloe, it was with the expectation that she leave Brian, and she wouldn't leave him, so she didn't offer any help. So clearly, we can see that depending on who's talking, we get a very different picture of how the relationship truly was. Jason says that Brian treated his wives with the utmost kindness and respect. Meanwhile, Chloe felt that she was trapped and was being controlled. It truly is impossible to know who exactly to believe because clearly they're both biased. Jason believes in the multiple wives thing, and he absolutely adores Brian as a person. He basically praises the ground he walks on. I also want to note that at the time of his testimony, Jason was in jail in another county for charges unrelated to Chloe's case. Meanwhile, Chloe is biased because she's on trial for the murder of her infant daughter. We have one video from before the murder where she says she feels trapped, but otherwise, everything else she is claiming is from after she already committed a horrible act and is speaking with her own best interest in mind. We also have to keep in mind that the video she did take before the murder, she took that after those Google searches started. So at the time of her making that video, she already had some sort of idea in her head that she was going to harm somebody else. So that's also something to keep in mind. Yes, the video was taken before the murder, before, but it was after she already started formulating the plan. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter all that much how the relationship truly was, because Chloe didn't need to kill her baby daughter. Chloe did have the support of her parents. She visited them just weeks before killing Hannah, but willingly went back to Brian after her mother begged her not to. If she truly felt like she couldn't get out, she should have stayed with her parents. But she didn't. She went back against their wishes and plotted the murder of her daughter, traumatizing so many other people in the process. The trial brought forward everything we've discussed up to this point, including the testimony from Jason, the Google searches, that video, as well as the findings from mental health experts. After each side made their closing arguments, the jury was sent off for deliberations. And it actually wasn't long before the jury came back and found that Chloe Driver is guilty of all charges, including first-degree murder, malice murder, and cruelty to children. But she's guilty with the stipulation that she is, in fact, mentally ill.
Mr. Foreman, has the jury reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. For each count below, we, the jury, find the defendant, count 1, malice murder, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but mentally ill. Count 2, felony murder, aggravated assault, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but mentally ill. Count 3, felony murder, cruelty to children in the first degree, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but mentally ill. Count 4, aggravated assault, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but mentally ill. Count 5, cruelty to children in the first degree, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but mentally ill.
Because of how recent this trial was, we don't yet know her sentence, though I imagine she will probably receive life. While awaiting her sentencing, the Georgia Department of Corrections is responsible for addressing her mental health concerns. So that's where the case sits right now. As far as I know, I don't think we've heard anything from Chloe's husband about any of this. I don't think he's been very outspoken. As far as the trial, he is still with Jessica and Sarah. Their relationship seems to be going just fine, but that's according to Jason. He hasn't been charged with anything at this point, and of course, it doesn't seem like he will be. This was such a crazy and interesting case to research. Obviously, it's fascinating when people live so different from the norm, and when I started researching this case, it absolutely sucked me in because I did not know what to expect, and I sat there and I watched Jason's testimony for hours, and let me tell you, he is not the most likable person, but he did get genuinely upset when talking about Hannah, as any human would. But I do think you should watch Jason's testimony, anything outside of what I didn't include in this video, because the way he talks and his opinions are very interesting. But either way, with everything going on in Chloe's life, I do think it is valid to question her mental state. I do personally think there was a level of control, again, seeing as how she was only 17 when the relationship started and he was almost 40. To me, grown men don't date young women like this unless they want to mold that woman into exactly who they want them to be. Just the age gap itself screams manipulation and control. But with that being said, do I think there was so much control that she couldn't get out? We truly don't know, but we at least know that she was able to visit her parents on occasion. So I do think she had at least enough support that she could have found a way out of it. I don't think she needed to kill her baby, and I don't know if I think she truly thought that she needed to either. But that is what I think, and now I want to hear your thoughts. Why do you think Chloe did this? Do you think Brian truly was controlling her and she felt this was the only way out? Or do you think she did this because she was jealous of the other women and wanted Brian all to herself? Let's discuss this and any other thoughts you have in the comments below. If you like this video, please make sure to go ahead and leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I put out new true crime and mystery videos every single week. Don't forget to turn that notification bell on so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Make sure to follow my Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. All will be linked down below. And if you have any case suggestions, please make sure to fill out the Google form, which is also listed down below. With that, I hope you guys have an amazing week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.